You did not warn me that's how you would start it. Right? I just clicked record thinking, oh yeah, he's got a genuinely interesting cold open topic, and you just right for the throat.
Yeah.
Right for the throat, man.
How else do you announce that America is saved? Our savior is back.
Our
political
savior. Okay.
The conscience of America is back where he belongs.
Exactly. Trump is in the White House.
No, that's not what we're talking about. Even if he thinks that he is back in the White House, it doesn't make it true yet.
Okay, so why is America saved?
Jon Stewart is back, or will be back to host The Daily Show. He's going to be a guest host. He's only going to host on Monday nights, and only for basically the duration of the election. But he's going to continue to produce it until 2025 with, I think, he has a partner that's going to be a showrunner with him as they find a new permanent host. But Jon Stewart is back at The Daily Show, which for me at least is very, very exciting.
I do gotta say, I disagree with him on a lot of his politics, but I think he's absolutely hilarious. And I do think he does a great job of calling BS where he sees it.
Yeah.
I think he tends to call it more frequently on one side than the other, but that's, I think, more due to his personal views, and that's fine. Yeah, that's how the world works.
I can't argue with that at all.
But I do think he's a pretty funny guy.
Yeah. I just personally, because I tend to agree with pretty much all of his politics. For me, it's exciting because I think I was really, really disappointed with the timing that he left The Daily Show in 2016, because it was, I think, just a few months before the election. And for me, it felt like we really, really needed his voice at that time. And it's been, he's done a few things since then. He's been really, really active with certain like political activist campaigns, in particular, making sure that Congress renews the healthcare bill that provides help for first responders who were involved with 9/11. He also had Apple TV show, which was good, but didn't really get a lot of, I think, the same viewership. And then, from what I understand, the show was canceled because he refused to refused to abandon an episode that was critical of China, and somebody, not saying who, but somebody pressured Apple to have them just scrap the episode, and he was like, well, then I'm just gonna quit.
That's fair.
Yeah. It's I think regardless of whether you agree with his politics, I think it's really hard to deny that he has a lot of integrity.
Yeah, he really stands his ground on a lot of things that I think you should not budge on, and I like that. And there are also some other things that he has come out and talked about how his views have changed over time.
Certainly.
I feel like he often gets painted by people on the right because he is a left-leaning Democrat. He's open about that. And I think because of that, he gets painted by a lot of people on the right as some super ultra far liberal person. But I feel like he's much more moderate than a lot of Republicans will give him credit for.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I also I totally get why people think that he is a super far left Democrat. I'm not even sure that he's not. But I think that he's, at the very least, he's informed.
Sure.
His criticisms are well thought out, and people can disagree with his viewpoint, but he's he does his due diligence when he's arguing against something, and it's really just a matter of ideology. I think that people have a problem with, which that's fair. He's definitely on one side of the political spectrum.
Well, speaking of someone who's on one side of the political spectrum, I think that's a great segue into our first topic. We wanted to talk about what's going on in Argentina. Well, I wanted to talk about what's going on in Argentina because I feel like it's a experiment, and a lot of my personal political beliefs sort of hinge on how this experiment goes.
Honestly, I think experiment is a perfect word to describe it. I mean, should we introduce the topic before we get into it?
Oh, why don't you do our opener? Like our who we are. We haven't done that yet.
Yeah. Welcome to Agreeable Disagreements. It is a podcast where two friends with differing ideologies talk about politics.
Oh, man. And we today want to talk about the libertarian politics, or at least libertarian ideals, in the sense of, or in the context of, Argentina's current president, Javier Milei, who...
Has he actually taken office, or is he?
Oh yeah,
president?
Yeah. He's been president.
Oh wow, that was
when
fast.
He was sworn in.
I think it was November 20 something, or at least that's
December.
When he was elected.
Yeah, he was sworn in December.
Wow, that's fast.
I mean, yeah, but it's a significantly smaller country than the United States, so there's fewer wheels to move.
Yeah.
And even then, that's pretty fast for us, too. Mid-November, we have elections, and then beginning of January, you're sworn in.
I mean, it's like January 17th.
Okay, so you got 2 months.
Like that, right?
2 months, yeah. Anyway, so if you don't know who Javier Milei is, he is a very...
Buckle up.
Imagine Ron Swanson. Yeah, totally. Ron Swanson's a huge libertarian. His whole slash it, bring this whole thing crumbling down. Like, that is what Javier Milei is. He is very much like, we need to bring the government to heel. We need to cut everything that is not essential. And I have a big list of things that are not essential. And on day one, we're just going to cut all of them effective immediately. And I don't know if he did it day one, but he did do it pretty quick.
Sure. But I feel like to say that he is Ron Swanson because they are both libertarians doesn't fully capture who Javier Milei is. And there's some definite differences between the two of them that I think we should talk about.
Yeah, for example, one speaks English, the other, I'm not convinced he does. I don't know that he does.
That is so far down my list. That is so wildly out of the scope of what I was even thinking.
So, I mean, I only thought of that because he recently spoke at the World Economic Forum, and, one of the international languages for that is English, and one of them is French. Of course, one of them is also Spanish, and he gave it in Spanish, but he gave his speech in Spanish. But, anyway, give me some of your reasons why you don't think it's a good comparison, because I agree it's not perfect, but,
I mean, oh God, where do I start? Okay. mostly, this is really the reason why I want to talk about him. He and I swear to God, this is all true. This is not me misconstruing anything or taking it out of context. This is stuff he has said and done.
Man, it really sounds like you're about to take stuff out of context and misconstrue a lot of
I
things.
promise you, I am not.
I'm not racist.
I am not,
but...
and he would be but he would be the first person to tell you, and in fact, he frequently does tell people about this.
Oh, I think I know what you're going to talk about. Keep going.
So he's one might describe him as a dog person. You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
So at some point he had a beautiful dog. I don't know what kind
it's a mastiff. It's a mastiff.
Yeah, mastiff. That makes sense. So he had this beautiful mastiff named Conan. Conan, unfortunately, passed away.
Right.
He then had Conan cloned at least 4 times, if not more. All of the clones are named after prominent economists, with but not John Maynard Keynes, because he absolutely hates Keynesian economics.
A lot of libertarians do.
Yeah, I mean, that I understand. What I don't understand is, and again, this is according to him, one of them advises him on like foreign policy. One of them, meaning one of the dogs, it advises him on like his personal life.
One of the clone dogs.
One of the clones of Conan. Basically, he uses his dogs as his personal advisors, and he legitimately thinks that they do speak to him, and that is one of the tools that he uses to make policy decisions.
Okay, I don't think he's serious about
own
that.
Mouth.
Okay, there's a lot of things that I have said that would be along those lines that a lot of people would probably think are serious, that I can promise you are not. All right. I mean, do not think
if it's a bit, he is really committing to it, because it's not just like one instance that he's done this. This is kind of a very, very frequent thing that he talks about and describes. And at no point does he ever let on if it is a bit.
I mean, I think he's committing to the bit because it's so ridiculous. And you look at a picture of the guy, nothing about him screams, I'm going to be a normal person in this interview. Right?
No, I agree.
Because part of his issues have also been media treatment of politicians and how the media will just latch on to ridiculous things and run with it. And so I would not be surprised if he is saying that just so the media will latch on to a ridiculous thing and run with it.
I don't know. I think that the subtext and his body language and everything else that does matter in communication would say otherwise. The other thing, and I'm gonna we should do like a timestamp if you want to cut this out. The other thing that he did say.
Write this down. Timestamp. Okay. Okay, timestamp written down. Continue.
Right. The other thing that he has also talked about on national media, I think you know where this one's going too.
I don't know. That's the thing.
Oh.
Because I've been more focused on his policies, not his persona.
He has said to national Argentinian media that he ejaculates once every 3 months. Which honestly, I don't even care if that does influence his policy decisions. I just think it's hilarious.
Again, I'm gonna say that's along his thing of I'm just gonna say ridiculous things. Because let's be honest. I mean, that is a huge deal to a lot of politicians right now, is how they're being treated by the media. Whether you're
Yeah.
left, right, I mean, no politician is being treated 100% fairly by media. And to some degree, I don't think they should, right? There's got to be some amount of criticism and freedom of press. But
Yeah.
the kinds of things that the media latches onto nowadays are these ridiculous things that, they could be asking him questions about BRICS. They could be asking him questions about, all the ministries that he's slashing. But instead, they're asking him these ridiculous questions about him dating a model or having cloned dogs. So, yeah, if I'm the guy who's been talking for months about how the media doesn't pay attention to the right things and is sensationalizing terrible, stupid things, I would say terrible, stupid things just to prove a point.
Sure, but you're also a rational person, and
who's to say he's not? And who's to say that if I wouldn't make these comments that you would stop saying I'm a rational person?
But I'm saying if he's not, which personally I don't think he is. If he's not, how are you going to distinguish between the two? And especially when you become the leader of a nation, maybe it's time to rein it in a little bit. But what I will say is, especially in the case of the last factoid I just was talking about, and also with the dogs, it's, from what I've seen, it's very much his desire to bring these up, and the interviewers would really rather not talk about them.
I'll be honest, that might be the case.
He's the one who's introducing these tangents, and as hard as these poor interviewers are trying, they kind of just have to let him go off and talk about this stuff in the hopes that eventually it gets back to something relevant. But regardless, it's objectively hilarious.
I mean, that's true. I will say he's being hilarious in the interviews, and I think that might be part of his campaign. Part of his thing is, if I come off as a funny guy,
I would say shtick, but
a shtick, that's a good word for it. Yeah, a shtick. That's a bit of his shtick. And if he's gonna stick to the shtick, then I think it might help him long term. Also, let's keep in mind one thing that I mean, you've visited other countries, you've got friends from other countries, you know that humor varies from culture, but I've noticed that it varies even more across language barriers. And who's to say, honestly, that this stuff, I mean, I don't know, because I'm not Argentinian. Maybe if someone from Argentina is listening to this, you can leave a comment or something and tell us if what he says is hilarious. But I would question, or sorry, I would be hesitant to say it's ridiculous stuff, because maybe it's comedy gold where he's from.
I think it's so sure. I don't think that is what is like the context around when he said these things.
Sure.
Just because of the pretty obvious distaste in the interviewers like mannerisms, and also I think regardless, he is in a very high position of power, and I think if he is trying to make a point, or he's trying to put the spotlight on the unfair treatment by the media of politicians, at a certain point, when you have that much of a responsibility, you have to stop, and you actually have to buckle down. And I don't see that happening from him. And maybe that's just a misstep on his part, and not quote unquote reading the audience. But I mean, everything I've seen points to the fact that he really is this deranged.
I don't know if I want to say deranged, but maybe convinced of those things. Let's put a pause on that and focus on what matters, because he can say and talk and do these silly things.
I want to take issue I want to take issue with you insinuating the fact that he has claimed that his clone dogs are his advisors does not matter, but continue.
I'm not saying that it doesn't matter. I'm saying let's look at, I guess I did say that, didn't I?
You did.
What
yeah.
what I'm saying is let's focus on the results, because
Sure.
I mean, honestly, we all have worked with that person who is really good at their job but is kooky as hell.
Some of us are that person.
Right.
This might be a good time to point out that I work exclusively alone, and
you could have just said it. You're talking about me, right? You could have just said that.
No. I work 100% by myself, and I don't think that's by accident.
Oh man. No, but I mean, we've all had those coworkers, professors, school teachers, whoever, people around us who are somehow really good at their job but are crazy.
Yeah.
You know, where you're just like, how are you allowed to be here? And then like Michael Scott, you're like, how is he the boss? But then you see him close some of those really big deals and you're like, oh, that's why you're the boss.
Right.
You know?
When he is negotiating with Idris Elba.
No, it's Tim Meadows. Because Idris Elba is Charles Minor. Oh, you're talking about that part.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm thinking of a different part of the series.
I'm talking about when they're convincing them to buy back or to give them back their jobs and buy out the Michael Scott Paper Company.
See, and I was thinking of the one. Oh, sorry, keep going. You go ahead.
Oh, it's just, I mean, it's that whole scene sums up why Michael got to his position and why he deserves to be there. I mean, it was a fantastic play on his part and a great scene.
I think earlier in the series, there's the episode where Tim Meadows is like, he's a city manager or something, and he's
when they go out to like Chili's or something.
Yeah, and Jan keeps trying to push it, and he's like, "Stop talking about it, Jan," and then waits until things are just the right time. So who knows? Yeah. Because maybe Javier Milei is a crazy guy who does some crazy things, but if he can deliver, I don't know that I care if he's talking to his dogs or not. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't really have an argument with that, and especially in the case of Argentina, because Argentina at 100 years ago, they were like one of the largest economies in the world, and they're still the third largest economy in South America, but they have been hit by some really, really hard economic setbacks. And they've tried a lot of different solutions and nothing has worked. And that's kind of what Javier Milei has been kind of campaigning on, is that, it's time to try something out of the box. But I do think he's maybe taken it a little bit too far, because I think any functioning country does need at least some source of revenue. Or someone to make sure that the people who are building the roads are not just hiring their cousin to put down I was gonna say like bootleg asphalt, but I don't even know what that would be. From what I understand about his policies, he is I think John Oliver described him, and this might be inaccurate, but I think
it is John Oliver.
I
love John Oliver.
Meaning that it is accurate, or are you?
No, I mean, I love John Oliver, but I feel like, okay, to compare him to Jon Stewart and The Daily Show, I feel like The Daily Show is a news show. No, I feel like it's
absolutely not. Hold on. Jon Stewart would be the first person to tell you that.
I feel like it is a news-driven comedy show.
Yes.
Whereas I feel like John Oliver is a comedy-driven show that features news. And there's a nuanced difference there.
Yeah.
Anyway, what were you saying? John Oliver described him as?
Described him as an anarcho-capitalist.
That's fair. Yeah, that is 100% fair.
I don't think Milei would have a problem with that.
No,
But
he says that all the time.
yeah, but there's, I can understand, like, when I'm talking with someone like you who at times, I don't know if this is like, if you completely identify with the label, but at times describes yourself as a libertarian. I can understand,
Sure. Yeah,
like, why you think that, why, for the reasons that you hold that ideology, why you hold that ideology, and why it, might make sense. But you also understand that there needs to be some oversight. And
sure.
what Javier Milei is kind of advocating is for absolutely 100% no oversight.
So, first of all, that's not entirely true. He's saying that there's a better way to oversee things than having a big brother government to do it, which I agree with. I think that, for example, if you're looking at the United States version, one of my big things is, why do we have the federal government doing all of these things that the states governments very much could and should be doing, right?
Yeah.
But
and also, Argentina doesn't have that kind of setup. I mean, it makes sense in America where, Oregon and Indiana or New York might as well be different countries.
They're a republic, so it's more similar to us than you think.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that the cultural differences, because they're much smaller.
Sure.
There's a lot of differences that make them a somewhat more homogenous populace than
Sure.
the United States.
Yeah. And that's true. But if anything, that would make his job easier, because you don't have nearly as many differing opinions and cultural viewpoints to bring into account. Right. Because West Coast.
I was just saying that in regards to like the states deciding.
Right.
I think it makes more sense for them to have a more federal involvement.
You're saying because they're smaller, a federal government that is in control makes more sense, because it's easier for them to oversee a smaller number of people. Whereas we have a larger country, we need to split the responsibility up, or we may have need to split that responsibility up more.
Yeah, I think if you or at the very least, it makes more, or I think it's easier for the federal government to take everyone's needs and considerations into account when you don't have a vast, large, like geographically large country where, different corners of it are wildly different culturally. I think some place, and
right.
I don't know anything about the culture in Argentina, but I imagine it's probably not as complicated to make a one size fits all solution there than it would be someplace like the US.
That's fair. However, I would simply counter that it's less about a diversification of opinion and more of a diversification of liberty, diversification of choice. Because, I mean, think about here in the United States. If I want to make a company in California, if I want to start my own business, how many lines of bureaucracy do I have to go through to start my own company in Los Angeles?
Yeah,
because you've got tons of them. And if you look at, compared to some of the more business friendly states like Texas or Utah or Indiana, people are starting businesses all the time because it's so much easier to do that. And that's why you have a lot of these businesses leaving Seattle, leaving Silicon Valley for some of these stereotypically more red states who are more business friendly, whether it's for taxing reasons or other reasons. And that's part of it. And so one of the things he's trying to do is not just with the ability to start your own business, but with a lot of things in general, he's trying to make it easier for people to make their own financial decisions. And so a lot of the things he's done have been to not only encourage the federal government of Argentina, or sorry, the government of Argentina, because I don't know if they call it a federal government, but not only to encourage them to lead by example by slashing their budget, but also to create more abilities for companies and individuals to live more frugally and practice more frugally. So one of the first things he did was he cut the number of government ministries in half. He went from 18 down to 9. And he laid off 5,000 public sector employees. And there's some pros and cons to that. Obviously, the con is there's 5,000 people now who don't have a job. However,
there's also 5,000 less people and half the government entities that are making sure that these people who are these private citizens, these privately owned businesses, are running their businesses ethically or not taking advantage of resources that limit other people's access to the resources, or
sure,
a lot of things that regulation and regulatory bodies are very much needed for. And I'm like, I don't want to say that like I'm not advocating for a totally authoritarian, super strong federal government. What I'm saying is there is a place for this kind of oversight, and I think he's really limited their ability to do the things that they should rightfully be doing.
So this hits on one of the key tenets of libertarian economics, and I want to come back to it. But one of the pros, I wanted to hit this point too. One of the pros of laying off those 5,000 public sector employees is that
that was too much.
Oh, you're adjusting your light?
Yeah, sorry. It was getting a little dark in here, but
you're good. No, but one of the pros to that is these aren't just random jobs. These are positions that he says should not have existed in the first place and were created either out of corruption, created out of government greed, or created out of maybe a system where they were needed, but now where we are, we just can't afford them. So he's not only looking at,
yeah.
I mean, he's not only looking at this and saying, okay, what do we, what's too much regulation, but he's also looking at it and saying, we are in a financial crisis. So what can we do to cut back? Like any organization should, when they're spending way more, like we should, to be honest, when you're spending way, way more money than you're bringing in, you've got to cut that somewhere in order to make your finances make sense. And so, I don't know if his idea is that this would be the permanent solution. It very well might be. And if he's as libertarian as he appears to be, it probably is. But his
here's
main
the thing
idea
that I don't understand.
Well, hold on one second. His main idea with these cuts is less about, or is as much about deregulation as it is, we just don't need this. We can't afford this, so we're cutting out what we don't need.
Sure. Hold on. I'm going to turn on my actual room light and fix the lighting issue real quick.
Sure, go ahead. I also get policy advice from my dogs.
Okay.
Yes.
Here's the thing, though.
Sure.
I get that, but he doesn't seem like the best person to be deciding what is essential and what isn't essential. He was a political pundit before getting into politics, but as far as I know, has not held any office as of yet. And before that, he was a soccer goalie. So, and part of that is why he appealed to so many people, is because he's an outsider, but also he very much does not have the experience to be able to know the nuances or the exact deficiencies within these agencies that he's making cuts to. And it's entirely possible that, that some of them are positions that are ineffective or corrupt. But I think, from what I know of what I've learned about Argentinian politics, just in the last few days when we decided to talk about this, it's gone further than just that, and he is also cutting a lot of positions that are essential, that are needed, and maybe
Like
ineffectual. But I mean, I don't know the specifics. I'm just going off of the word of people who have, been within the public sector there for their entire career.
Because I'm
Not
looking at the
a
ones
footballer who then was paid to talk about politics without ever actually having any experience within politics or the public sector.
So, okay, I got two questions here. First of all, if talking to Jon Stewart, if he were to run for any level of public office, would you vote for him?
That's actually a really good question.
Because if the answer is yes, then you need to reevaluate everything you just said about him being a pundit with little political experience.
No. I think, had I not already thought a lot about this, I definitely would have said yes. But there's two things. One, I have actually thought a lot about this. And two, I've listened to what he's said about this exact same thing. And so I don't know if I would.
Sure.
I agree with I agree with his positions. I think he is a not just a decent person, but a good person. I think he understands the issues, even the issues that I don't agree with his opinion on. But I mean, I agree. He doesn't have any experience within politics, and so I have to take that with a grain of salt. But more importantly, he would say, and has said, that he is not somebody that should be in public office.
Sure.
Because he's a comedian. He's not. He's a pundit, but he describes himself as a comedian.
Okay, but Al Franken was a comedian.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the beautiful things about our democracy is that, one, people have the right to say, hey, I don't think I should be a political office. And I think that's noble of him to recognize, hey, I'm good where I'm at. I don't know that I would be good in other places. But it's also, anybody can become anything. So who's to say that...
But not everybody should.
You're right. Not everybody should. I don't think Al Franken should have been a senator for so many decades.
I mean, I disagree. I liked Al Franken's political positions. I didn't so much like the picture that he took of him implicitly groping a U.S. service member, and that's why he resigned. But I liked him as a politician. I liked him as a comedian. I think that that's also kind of an outlier, and I think that Jon Stewart might also be an outlier.
Is it? Because, I mean, you look at people like Trump who have done the same thing, obviously many more times and to a greater degree. And so if you're willing to overlook that for Al Franken, then, I mean, that makes sense why a lot of people are willing to overlook that with Donald Trump. Because here's the thing. I've noticed that worldwide, there is a huge distaste right now for people who are career politicians. And I mean, I've got that distaste. Why am I going to trust someone who has the ability to vote to raise their own salary, but won't lower my taxes? Because to me...
Yeah, but just because they're a career politician doesn't make that any more likely. And the fact that they are currently a politician makes that more likely.
True.
But if you vote somebody in who has no political experience, into a political office, then they then become the enemy in that scenario. And the problem that the criticism I have with what you're saying is that politics is the only field in existence where a lack of experience or skill set or any proven ability to be effective or good at your job is more respected than having those things.
Well, my comeback to that would be that it's because in our particular political system, where it's a democracy, we are built on the idea of you bring with you what you've built up to that point, and that should be your experience, right? So my experience as a teacher, for example, is going to give me some very unique perspectives and drives as a potential politician, just like you as a coffee roaster, right? Or someone else who's white collar, or someone who's, coming up from the dregs of society. People are going to bring all these different viewpoints to try and make a better society. And so with that in mind, like I could care less if he was a soccer goalie. Some athletes have made great politicians in other places. It's not.
Yeah, I'm not denying that,
but it's not. It's not a good qualification. I'll agree with you saying I'm not going to vote for someone just because they're an outsider. I'm not going to vote for someone just because they're a pundit, just because they're a goalie. I also prefer to look at what are they currently saying and doing. And on that note, we were talking about.
Hold on, go ahead. Can I just address the I guess more existential part of that? The whole thing about I understand why people don't trust career politicians, but I think you and I at least both know that being a politician and politicking is much more about how you feel on issues and how you're going to vote. A lot of it is those backdoor deals, those making concessions and earmarking and pork barrel spending and trying to work the system in order to get the things that you want for your constituents, hopefully that your constituents also want. And so what I feel like more what it would be like, since you referenced our two careers, I feel it more what it would be like is, I mean, would you be comfortable with, say I knew just everything about the history of the Soviet Union?
All right. Yeah.
I mean, I know it's a stretch.
You're laying some coals here. No, what I'm saying is like you're laying a good point here. Let's hear it.
But say the only thing different about me, Andrew, right now, and this hypothetical Andrew, was just that I had an encyclopedic knowledge about the Soviet Union.
Okay.
Would you let me in your classroom to teach your children? Or teach your students?
So here's the thing, like
if the answer is anything but no, I'm gonna have a conversation with your principal.
Well, I'll have to send you her number, because here's the thing. The answer is yes, I would, but I would have some specific restrictions, and I would have a very specific thing I would want you to talk about ahead of time. And the reason I would say yes is not because I would think you are a subject matter expert, but because if I'm telling you yes, hey, come and give, or if I'm asking you, come and give this presentation or come and teach this particular lesson, it's because I think you have a particular viewpoint that I'm not sure I could adequately express, or that I think would be better expressed by someone other than myself. So for example, I have had guest teachers come in and talk to my students about things that, they may not be super experts on, but they're more knowledgeable than me or have different perspectives that I just can't teach. And that's something I really value. So even if it's, like you said, just an encyclopedic knowledge, there's going to be things that stick out to you more than stick out to me that are probably still going to be important for them to know about from your point of view.
More what I'm getting at is is the fact that I have no experience or really skill being an educator, much less be an educator to children. And
Sure.
that's an incredibly important part of your job that makes you much more effective than somebody like me who has no experience, has no knowledge of how to do that part. But somebody could distill your job down to just, educating about history, but you and I both know there's so much more to that.
Sure.
I mean, I would say the actual facts and the knowledge that you're imparting, that's probably what, 30% of your actual job.
Sure. And don't misconstrue what I'm saying here as to be like, I don't think there should be career politicians. What I mean is, like, I understand that there is the need for some amount of career politicians because they're going to get better at writing, passing, judiciating these committees, things like that. I completely see some need for it. The problem is some of these career politicians, I would venture to say the majority of these career politicians, have become so corrupt with their insider trading, with their lobbying, with their pork barrel funding. Like, so much garbage happens in Congress, and
I would say 100%. There's the Machiavelli quote that from the Prince that says something like, "Man is neither naturally good or evil; he is wicked and self-serving." That can be used for good; it can be used for bad. But there's no such thing as true altruism. Everyone is acting in their own self-interest, and unfortunately, a lot of people who get into politics find that it becomes a lot easier to affect things that benefit you or that you have a vested interest in.
Sure.
That's the nature of politics, though. That doesn't stop regardless of whether or not somebody is a career politician or they're a footballer.
Oh, I 100% agree. I mean, look at George Santos, who got into politics arguably just to take advantage of those things. And he's not the only one. He's just the one who got caught doing a lot of extra shady stuff.
He just did a really bad job of it.
Really, though. But I think, though, what I'm trying to get at when I say this is that people are upset with the amount of that going on. And so the idea is, okay, if we've had all these people that we're voting for who are insiders, and this is what's happening, let's try the outsiders, because we know we can't trust these people, so let's try something else.
Yeah, and especially in Argentina's case, I can kind of get it.
Right. I mean, 211% inflation rate in 2023 alone. I mean, I would be pissed if I was Argentina.
And to be fair to Milei, they've tried a lot of different solutions, and this is still where they've ended up. So I can understand that sentiment, but also I think it was done haphazardly. I think this electing this guy to shake things up, I think, is haphazard.
I think that this is one of those time will tell things, and this is why I talk about it as a test that a lot of my personal views hinge on, because he's doing a lot of things. I'm not going to say everything he's doing is something I want to see done here, but a lot of things he's doing are things that I have been saying for years that we should be doing to cut things down or to cut things back, or things that I would like to see done.
Biden should be asking Commander how to deal with the gas prices.
So what I would counter, I'm going to go back to another point you made earlier where you were talking about how he's cutting a lot of jobs that are essential, and he's getting rid of a lot of ministries or sections that are essential for regulation. And it turns out, looking at it a little bit more, he's only getting rid of, I think, 3 or 4. And the rest that he's getting rid of are actually being combined into some. So he, for example, completely got rid of the Ministry of Culture, which is their whole arts society thing.
Okay.
Which,
I could make an argument that that's essential, but I understand why that would be cut.
right. Well, and the thing is, you don't need a Ministry of Art. People can go do art without a government ministry. I think that's his argument. Is I understand the idea of trying to fund the arts as an arts and humanities teacher and someone who like is involved in music and theater and things like that. Like, I get it, but I also get that that is not an essential for a government entity to have.
Yeah, we could go into how it protects people's access and availability to do arts, which I think the ability to have arts and artistic expression and that kind of thing is kind of a human necessity. But I get what you're saying, and that's a much deeper ideological and
Sure.
metaphysical conversation.
So then he's also got rid of the Ministry of Women, Gender, and Diversity.
Okay, again, essential, but I understand why it's cut.
See, from a libertarian perspective, I would be like, see, libertarians come from the idea that they're already equal. Why should we be focusing? I as a person
because they're not they are equal. There's a difference between what should be and what is. What should be is that they are viewed as equal and have the same opportunities. What actually happens is not that.
You're right, and I agree. However, the opposite side of that is a lot of these ministries and we can do a whole episode on this another time because I don't want to do this right now. But a lot of these programs end up overcompensating, and you end up with hiring people specifically for their gender or diversity reasons rather than qualifications. And a libertarian perspective is going to say, why do I care if you're a woman? Why do I care if you're transgender, homosexual, or anything? I don't care about your race. I don't care about that. I care about, are you qualified to do the job better than other people? Aside from that, right. I have no qualms. Right. So that's his perspective. I think that's my issue
with the libertarian perspective, though, is that it's great to say, I don't care about that stuff, but it's much more accurate and beneficial if you not you. I'm using the general you. If you realize that subconsciously you do care about it. That's why, like,
no, I agree.
After the George Floyd protests, there was this big thing about not saying, I'm not racist, but rather saying, I recognize that because of my, my white privilege, or, this and that I have certain biases that I was unaware of that I'm trying to address and change. That's a totally different thing than saying I'm not racist, and is much more conducive to actually fixing the systemic and inherent issues that these agencies are created in the first place to address.
Yeah, but
and if you leave it to the people to decide for themselves, what I think you will find, and what typically you do find, is that they're not actually doing that stuff that they initially said we don't need this agency to make sure that we do.
Sure. I would counter that, though, and say that the difference here is one is a realistic point of view and one is an idealistic point of view. And the problem, the disconnect, I won't say problem, the disconnect here is that I think both viewpoints are trying to accomplish the same thing. It's just that one of them is doing it by what I'll call vocal introspection, where you're going around saying, hey, I'm working on this. Whereas the other is just saying, I'm just going to change right now and be better right now. Who cares about the societal? I'm going to change myself right here, right now. And expect that to also be the societal change. And I'm not going to say that either one's... I think they
I'm
both.
not sure I'm following.
So the one you're trying to say is, hey, we're going to try and change society by, encouraging introspection and people talking about these conversations and having these conversations. Whereas the one I'm
Yeah.
talking about is people saying we don't need to have a conversation about it. We're just going to do it. And the problem is that one doesn't fix the underlying societal problems that yours addresses. But I've also seen.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
But the flip side is, I don't think I've seen a whole lot of action come out of those conversations. I have seen so many of. This is one of my big problems with a lot of these leftist things. Is I don't have any problems with some of the things that came out of the Black Lives Matter movement. A lot of things that came out of like the police reforms. I think a lot of those things were necessary, needed. I love it, but I I I think that most of them have just been conversations and not actually a lot of change.
You're absolutely right, but the reason that is because of the pushback that has hindered the progress that should and needs to be made.
I'll say yes. There's some there.
It's in gridlock, and if it, I mean, there have been some changes, but there haven't been enough changes to actually significantly affect the issue with using police reform to affect the number of specifically black men who are being killed by police.
I will say that my issue is, you're right in that there's a lot of gridlock and there's a lot of pushback. I'm not going to deny that, because there is, and in some of those things there should be a little bit. A lot of those things, most of those things, there should not be. However, it has also been my experience that a lot of people I have met and had these conversations with do not actually want to have these conversations to have some amount of change happen. They want to have these conversations to show publicly that they are having those conversations.
To virtue signal.
They're Pharisees, to use the biblical term, right? These people who are going out saying these things but not actually doing things. And that's been
that's
bigger problem.
Yeah. I've seen that too. I think that's a fair criticism. But I mean, I think that's it's I was going to say that's not the norm, but unfortunately that is the norm. I think I think that particular population that just wants to virtue signal, I think should not be counted with either side.
Sure.
Because you could make an argument that they belong to either side.
Oh, for sure. 100%. I see a lot of Republicans do the same thing.
Yeah. But I think, in terms of again, just using, police reform, you have, I'll acknowledge that there are, police departments that have made changes. Certain, for instance, like a lot of police departments have had like a similar policy to stop and frisk, and they changed that after George Floyd. We still have, though, I forget what the program is called, but it's like the 10 something program that creates a somewhat backdoor pipeline from defense contractors to police departments that provide them with like MRAP type, like armored vehicles that are, made to withstand IEDs, or military technology, weapons, defense systems, all of these things that shouldn't be this, and there are going to be a lot of ideological arguments to this, but the civilian police force should not be a militarized force. They are a civilian peacekeeping force. And there's the old adage where when you have a hammer, all you see is nails.
Yeah.
And so those types of things, those types of programs, those larger systemic things that didn't change after the, George Floyd protests and Black Lives Matter movements. Those are the things that are actually going to affect it, but that also were so mired by the gridlock that we weren't actually able to make any significant change.
Yeah, and there's
and so that's why I think these institutions that these agencies that he's cutting that are quote unquote non-essential are, yeah, you can survive, but in order to thrive and in order for the well-being of your populace to improve or at least not get worse are kind of essential.
Yeah, but at the same time, and so 40% of their population right now is living below the poverty line. And
yeah, I had actually heard a higher statistic, but
okay.
But
this is coming from an article back in December by the Art newspaper, which I'll admit is probably not the best one, but I looked specifically for a list of ministries that he cut, and this was the top result. So anyway, so
I think my statistic was from September anyway. So it was an older statistic.
So here's the thing. It's fine and dandy to want a lot of these bonus things, but if your choice is between having a government that has a Ministry of Women, Gender, and Diversity and having a government that is able to help you put food on your table and, not die of starvation, people are going to choose that last one every single time,
Right. I'm not arguing with that.
And this is not the first time we've seen something like this happen. I mean, if you look at the French Revolution, you look at the Bolshevik Revolution, you have these instances where governments are living these very bureaucratic systems. They're running these lavish, maybe not lifestyles. In those particular instances, yes, lavish lifestyles. But you have this, basically big government with a lot of things that were deemed necessary, but when it gets down to the nitty-gritty, it's not doing as much as other things could be. And so it's an interesting historical phenomena to see that the more people's needs are taken care of, the more we move towards liberalism. And the more we move towards things like worrying about diversity, worrying about arts, worrying about culture. And then the further we get from that, the more we get towards poverty, the more and more people care more about tradition, the more and more people care about their own unique culture, the more and more people care about fiscal responsibility. And so it's interesting to see how people prioritize things. And right now, based on their financial situations, and right now, because their financial situation is so dire, a lot of them are just like, yeah, no, cut it all, get back to the bare bones, and then we can rebuild to that. And speaking of which, I just want to go over the other things he's cut or combined. So he has also cut, he has combined the Ministry of Social Development, Ministry of Education, and the Ministry of Labor, Employment, and Social Security, which is one ministry. That's not three separate ones. Into a single Ministry of Human Capital, which, so to me, I'm like, ooh, Ministry of Education as an educator.
That name alone, it needs a PR boost.
Yeah.
Human Capital sounds like something from Soylent Green.
I'll agree with that. However, when you look at it from the sense of you're investing in your future by investing in people, I think that's an okay term. But I'll agree. First glance, I was like,
it's
okay.
It's not the best name.
Like, benefit of the doubt.
Sure.
And then the Ministries of Public Works, Transportation, Energy, Mining, and Communications are all being merged into a Ministry of Infrastructure, which I think that makes sense.
With the same number of employees and the same resources that were devoted individually now also being combined into one, or are they receiving a excessively slashed budget and resources and workforce in order to oversee all of these things?
I
think maybe you can kind of get where I'm going with the problem if the latter is the case.
So I do think it's the latter. However, if you look at like that, the fact that the entire government had its ministries halved, but only 5,000 people lost their jobs. Like if we saw half of our departments in the federal government disappear overnight, I would expect way more than 5,000 layoffs. Even if you were to take that and just turn it into a per capita ratio. Right now, you're probably thinking to yourself, wow, this is a really weird place to put an advertisement in the podcast. I mean, not only is it closer to 2/3 of the way in, but Cameron was also basically right in the middle of a sentence. And you're right, this is about 2/3 of the way in, and I really was right in the middle of a sentence. But here's the thing, that sentence goes nowhere. Neither do the next 20 minutes of us talking in circles about I don't even remember what. Neither Andrew or I liked that section, so we're just gonna cut straight to the next topic. No segue, nothing. This message has been brought to you by lazy editing and even lazier writing. Like we write this. Okay, so we recently had 2 primary elections. We had Iowa and New Hampshire. And I feel like Iowa went about like everyone expected, but then what happened after Iowa has been very interesting, I think.
When you say it went as expected, what are you specifically referring to?
Meaning that Trump won it in a landslide.
Yes, yeah. I think that was, I think that that's kind of expected for all of them. I was surprised with the Iowa caucus, specifically because they had like record low temperatures. They had like a blizzard, which was not unusual for Iowa, but typically the Iowa caucus is heavily publicized, heavily attended, heavily participated in. They had 100,000 people cast votes this year, and their registered voter, or the number of registered voters that they have is around 2 million. So hugely, like just no one participated in it.
I know. Which, it is kind of a big, I want to say, cultural thing in Iowa, but at the same time, it's also like any other primary election where it's a big cultural thing if you're going to do it, Yeah. I do think it's lower turnout than they probably normally would have gotten, but at the same time, caucusing is a fairly inefficient way for a primary election, just because everybody has to get together, and then it takes a long time to talk, and then people got to count, and it's so much easier.
I'm not even sure if I understand what a caucus is.
It's like
I just know that it's different
meeting.
than an election.
It's like a Quaker meeting, but about politics.
Where
they just get around and talk.
Individual people still vote, though? How does it...
No, it's more like they just kind of come to a consensus. Let me Google this. Because maybe I'm wrong. How does caucus work, Iowa? Okay.
Because I know that's why, even though like the Iowa caucus typically happens before the New Hampshire primary, New Hampshire is known as the first primary because Iowa is a caucus. It's not a primary. So
right.
I'm really not sure how it works there.
So Wikipedia, which I know Wikipedia gets a terrible rap, but it's not as bad as everybody says.
Wikipedia gets a bad rap in America and America alone, and that's because people don't understand how to fact check anything or back up their sources, and they don't understand how to utilize Wikipedia to be effective.
Anyway, so it says
so
they
think they should stop everyone else from doing that. Sorry.
That's true. So first of all, the Republican and Democrat caucuses do work slightly differently, but in general, the caucuses are generally defined as a, quote, gatherings of neighbors. Rather than going to polls and casting ballots, Iowans gather at a set location in each of Iowa's precincts. Typically, these meetings occur in schools, churches, public libraries, or even individuals' houses. Caucuses are held every
So
2
far, doesn't
years.
sound any different than a primary.
So far, caucuses are held every 2 years during both the presidential and midterm seasons, but those that receive national attention are the presidential preference caucuses.
I'm assuming that that's basically what they're terming the caucuses that are held during the primary election cycle.
Yeah, so there's a panel that like introduces their party platforms and resolutions, and then the Democratic Party. It looks like it's just a lot of talking first. So everyone gets together and talks, and then the Democratic one they vote. The Republican one.
The people vote, or do they have?
Ooh, good question.
Like representatives, councils. This might be. We don't need to get mired down on this. This might just be something that you and I can look up.
Yeah, it looks like they elect delegates, and then those delegates vote.
Okay.
So I guess it's like break up into groups and then choose the group, delegate kind of thing. I could be wrong on that. That's a very skimmed reading. And then the Republican one, it's more like they just declare. They just get together and talk and declare someone.
Regardless of how a caucus works differently than a primary, what I do know is that typically the Iowa caucus receives a lot of participation.
Yeah.
And this year they didn't. Some of that certainly can be attributed to the weather that they were having, but also part of me kind of wonders, I mean, obviously Democrat participation is going to be way lower because we've pretty much just abandoned any any entertainment of having any other candidates. But on the Republican side, I kind of wonder how many Republican voters or would-be Republican voters are kind of just dissatisfied with any of the choices.
I think it's not just dissatisfied, although that is definitely part of it. I think there's a lot of people who are dissatisfied with their choices.
Unmotivated would be a better.
I would say unmotivated because on one hand, if you use the word unmotivated, you're going to get those people who are dissatisfied and aren't going to vote. But you're also going to get the people who say Trump's going to get it anyway, so I'm not going to bother.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I think unmotivated is more what I meant. Yeah.
I think what's interesting though is what happened. Not at the Iowa caucus, but what happened after is how many people dropped out either right before because they weren't polling very high or right after because they didn't do well. I was shocked that DeSantis dropped out at all.
Yeah. I
saw that and was like, what? The other, like, outside of Trump, the front runner dropped out?
Yeah, but I mean, he was the front runner, but I think he got 7% of the delegates, and Nikki Haley got 5%, and Trump got however many more percent. He was the front runner, but it's pretty generous to say that he was any competition, and I think that's maybe what motivated him to drop out, because I really think that he at least had the gumption to stick it out for a little bit longer. But then what was more surprising was how he acted after he dropped out, which you and I have like texted back and forth about, but it was it was sad. It was sad. It was like I texted you last night when we were watching the New Hampshire primary. If I didn't find Ron DeSantis so awful, I would feel bad for him.
The guy has been. Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. Sorry.
He immediately endorsed Trump, a guy who has been nothing but a bully to him. Right. And just use every opportunity and every dirty like play in the book to delegitimize DeSantis's campaign and to just belittle and degrade him. And he just rolled over and jumped on the Trump train, but not before he had to ask Trump to please stop using the DeSanctimonious name.
I don't know if that's confirmed. I haven't seen that anywhere.
That is true. That is a thing that happened.
I don't know if he asked, but I am seeing that Trump is saying he's not going to say it anymore.
Yeah, he from the account that I heard, and I did hear this on. I heard this on Pod Save America, which is a liberal-leaning podcast, but it's one of their hosts, among others, is Jon Favreau, who was Obama's head speechwriter, and it's hosted by a few other people who were also Obama aides, and they absolutely are doing their due diligence when they're making claims like this and reporting things that people have said. But DeSantis, when he called Trump to tell him that he was giving him his endorsement, what he said was, "Does this mean that you'll put the DeSanctimonious name to rest," or something to that effect? Which, yes, Ron DeSantis has every right to make sure that he's going to stop being bullied, but also it's just like it gives me the sense of like, all right, I'll be your lackey, but please stop being mean to me.
I mean, I definitely still get that sentiment. I'm not finding anything that confirms that phone call happened. And that doesn't mean it didn't. It's very possible that it did. There's lots of things that go unreported in the national news, especially things like this. I'm just not seeing an official confirmation. However, I will say, you're pretty close with the delegates. So Trump got 20 delegates, DeSantis got 9, Haley got 8. Trump only got 51% of the vote, though. And
yeah, but that's 51% of 14 or 15% of the total like registered voters that could have voted. So that's actually 7%. I mean, depending on how many Republicans versus Democrats, that's basically less than 10% of Republican voters voted for Trump.
Here's the sad thing, though. According to the Associated Press, Chris Christie, who had already dropped out, and we're probably talking write-ins here, only got 35 total votes. Now, what I think is really interesting, though, is because
poor
DeSantis...
little guy.
I don't pity him. I don't like him at all.
Also, can we just acknowledge the fact that along with Ron DeSantis dropping out of the race, Asa Hutchinson dropped out of the race, and I was not aware that he was still in the race.
Oh yeah, me too. Now there's two things that I think are really interesting about New Hampshire. The first is that Nikki Haley, who I like, if my primary was today, I would vote for her.
You've been on the Nikki Haley train from the beginning.
She's said a few things recently in regards to war funding and retirement age that I'm very much against, but
and the cause of the Civil War.
And the cause of the Civil War. However, having lived in the South, I understand why she says that. I'm not going to agree with it. I think it's objectively wrong.
She made the exact same mistake that the Penn State and Harvard presidents made, where all she had to do, or all the those college presidents had to do, was just denounce genocide. All Nikki Haley had to do was just to not be caught in that gotcha trap that person
Yeah,
at the rally set for her, was just say
exactly.
it was slavery, and she didn't. And then last week, I don't remember what where she was, or no, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, but she then did it again
Yeah,
in a slightly different way, and I know that she knows that what the cause of slavery was. I know that she was trying to weasel her way out of it. Just stop trying to,
yeah.
uh, you know,
Stop trying to make fetch happen.
yeah, yes, it's not going to happen.
Um,
My
but
father
what?
was the inventor of toaster strudel.
All right. So so I think what's interesting though about the Democratic, or not the Democratic, the Republican primary in New Hampshire is that she got 43% of the votes.
Yeah,
I thought way more of DeSantis's voters were going to go for Trump, but apparently not. However,
yeah,
there may be another explanation for this. It may not be that DeSantis voters are going for Haley. And I guess we're going to have to see the next primary what happens to see if this is the case. But New Hampshire
yeah.
has an inordinate amount of independent voters.
Yes, and an inordinate amount of people on their ballot, because the only thing it requires to get on their ballot is a declaration that you're running for president and $1,000.
Yep. However, Biden didn't make it onto their ballot, and we'll talk about that in just a second.
That was a choice by the
Save it, because I want to talk about that. That's my other thing that's interesting about this primary. But Trump was saying for a while that the New Hampshire governor allows Democrats to vote in the Republican primaries, and that's not true. New Hampshire, you vote with the primary that you are registered to vote with. So Republicans vote Republican, Democrats vote Democrat. However, independents can vote in either one.
Yeah, which is different than Oregon, where independents don't get to vote in either, and you have to vote for whichever party you're registered for.
Exactly. And so, so I think that is probably the most likely explanation, because Nikki Haley has been doing pretty good among moderates nationwide. Mm-hmm. And so I'll be interested to see the next primary to see if she maintains this percentage of the votes, because that would tell me, I think, that would be a better litmus test of, is this DeSantis voters going to Haley, or is this moderates turning out?
I have two thoughts on this. The first thought is that, just like with Iowa, the turnout for New Hampshire was ridiculously low. When Nikki Haley went up to basically concede their primary, at least NBC was reporting 17% of the vote being counted, about a little over 50,000 total votes for at least the two Republican candidates being cast. And New Hampshire has a little over 1 million registered voters. So that's 5%.
Actually,
so I think what was your actually?
According to The Guardian, New Hampshire, this primary actually set a voter turnout record.
Oh, really?
For a primary election, 300,000 people turned out to vote.
This was I'm specifically talking about when Nikki Haley threw in the towel, at least for New Hampshire. There was about 50,000, and this was just me looking at the numbers on the ticker tape at the bottom. But when she got up to speak, it was around 50,000 votes being cast. There was 25,000 being cast for Trump and 20,000 for Nikki Haley.
Gotcha.
I do think, I was surprised that she did it that early, but I think in terms of from what we saw in the low voter turnout in Iowa, and how soon they called the election for Trump in New Hampshire,
Mm-hmm.
I think what we're seeing is people possibly not engaging in the political process, at least for the primaries, because everyone thinks that Trump is already, destined to get the nomination,
Destined.
or people are just abstaining because they don't like Biden, and they would have liked to have some kind of primary process to at least consider or hear other candidates, or for Biden to have whatever the opposite of an echo chamber is in order to voice their opinion. But they also don't like either of the Republican candidates, and so they're just abstaining from the entire process altogether. I don't know which one is true. I don't know if there's any
Sure.
merit to that, but I think that there's something weird going on where people are dissatisfied at a level that I don't know if we've ever seen, at least within, the last 50 years in American politics. And that I don't know how that's going to pan out.
I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. Now, the second thing, though, that I thought was interesting about this primary election is that President Biden was not on the primary ballot, but still won.
Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding of why he wasn't on the ballot is because the Democratic National Committee chose to have South Carolina be the first primary, and New Hampshire for the Democratic
protested.
Right. Well, because New Hampshire has been the first Democratic primary since 1920, and it is actually in their state law that they are the first Democratic primary.
Yeah.
And so it's less about Biden and more about the Democratic Party in the state of New Hampshire. And so
they
because
had their
of
feelings hurt. Yeah. But also it doesn't matter because Biden's the Democratic primary is just a show.
Oh, it's
at least
always
for this cycle.
No, it's always just a show because the primaries don't matter because they get together at their convention at the end and the delegates don't mean anything because the super delegates come in and that's who actually votes. There's more super delegates than there are actual delegates. So the reason I think though that this Democratic primary is unique is because even with, Biden's a shoo-in to win no matter what. Because especially since the Democratic National Committee has said we're not officially running any other candidates. Candidates can still choose to run.
No one's allowed to run against him.
Well, they're allowed to run. They're just not being officially sanctioned to do it by the Democratic National Committee. Because like Dean Phillips is one of the people on there. He got almost 20% of the votes. Marianne Williamson, right? However, I would have expected, very few people want to put in that extra 2-second effort to write in a name.
Yeah. Especially when you have to have in-person voting, which I think New Hampshire does.
And still, President Biden was written in on 56% of the votes, which that's impressive. I gotta admit, like he ran a good write-in campaign.
Yeah,
I did not expect he didn't. No, he didn't need to, but I just think it's interesting that it still happened. I would not have thought that many people would have taken that extra bit of time to write in a president that they knew was going to get elected anyway.
Yeah. Although I did hear Chuck, I can't remember his last name.
Schumer?
Chuck something on, not Chuck Schumer. He's one of the anchors on NBC.
Oh, yeah, then I don't know.
I think he had said something last night in their coverage that and this was fairly early on, and I also haven't found anything to substantiate this claim, nor have I reviewed the clip that I saw to make sure that I misunderstood it, but I know it was a thing that was talked about before the primary. He, I think, made some kind of comment saying that, like, so far by that point in the night, at least on the Democratic ticket, the thing that was most voted for with their write-in ballot was the phrase ceasefire.
Interesting.
Which, again, there's, as far as I can tell, there's no merit to say that Biden got more, or that it got more votes than Biden in the long run. But I know it was a thing that was talked about beforehand as a form of protest by Democrats, even Democrats that, you know, support Biden, which makes me concerned about Biden's the effect that Biden's handling of Gaza is going to affect him in the general election.
Oh, it 100% is, because here's the thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, it definitely is.
You have, it's going to come down to a Republican president who supports Israel with a Republican constituency who supports Israel.
Yeah.
And a Democrat candidate who probably supports Israel, but with a constituency.
Supports Israel.
Yeah, but with a constituency that doesn't.
No, not with a constituency who doesn't support Israel. With a constituency who doesn't support the unfettered enabling of Israel to attempt to wipe out an entire population, which is exactly what Netanyahu has said he will do and has been doing. And he has gone on the record to say that he will not accept any resolution to this conflict that allows for a two-state system.
To be fair, and we can talk about. Go ahead, finish your sentence. Go ahead.
I'm just saying it's Biden has done virtually nothing to bring about a ceasefire. I understand why he's doing that. But it's not that the people who are protesting, at least the majority of us who are against how he's handling the, you know, Israel-Gaza situation, it's not that we're against Israel. It's not that we condone Hamas. It's that he could do things differently and hold Israel accountable for their wrongdoing while also still supporting Israel.
I've got some newer feelings about this. We might want to do another episode on that in the future. We've talked about maybe doing a Middle East episode. We can maybe talk about that again there a little bit, because I've learned some new things about both sides of the conflict that haven't made me more supportive of Israel, but have made me less supportive of Gaza and Hamas. If that makes sense.
Well, so here's the I was watching an interview that the hosts of Pod Save America did with Obama, and now they were all part of Obama's White House team, part of his campaign team. Jon Favreau was his head writer. It's a different Jon Favreau than that Jon Favreau.
Yeah, it's not Iron Man Jon Favreau.
Yeah, it's not Iron Man Chef. It's not that Jon Favreau. But they were asking his opinion or something, you know, about his opinion on Biden's handling of Gaza, and what he said really resonated with me. Is that what people need to understand is the phrase "and." It is possible to condemn the Hamas attacks on October 7th and condemn the Israeli response to those attacks and acknowledge that there are people who are without water, without food. About, I think, less than 25% of the aid that has supposed to been brought into Gaza has actually made it in there. So it's, you know, you can acknowledge that there are people suffering in Gaza and that there is a fair amount of support for Hamas's actions within Gaza, and that still doesn't mean that Israel should be dropping 20,000-pound bombs indiscriminately and leveling 80% of the buildings in at least North Gaza. And like it's not a black and white situation. It's not a dichotomy. It is possible to see the wrongdoing where the wrongdoing is.
Yeah.
And still, try to find a solution where there's not at least so many atrocities and where people are held accountable for their actions.
I really like that. And I think that gets to the heart of what we're doing with this podcast is the power of and. It's okay to have nuanced feelings about something.
I think that's why it resonated with me when I heard it. Was that it was, I think kind of the ethos that you and I have talked a lot about in regard to this show.
And on that self-congratulatory note, do you have a fun fact for us?
Wait, no. Can we talk about how we think? I want to talk a little bit more about the primary and
really, because I'm tired,
specifically
man.
Nikki Haley.
It's getting late.
I
my time.
know. You're 3 hours ahead.
Snappy, man. Let's get to it.
I don't know. I mostly I just want to hear your point of view, because I could see Nikki Haley dropping out. I think she's supposed to have a really big fundraising event with a lot of really wealthy people, and she really doesn't have a whole lot of grassroots funding. And if they decide to cancel that event, I think it's next week, I could see her dropping out. I could also see her staying until I think it's June 4th is the very last primary. So how are you feeling as a Republican with her somewhat lackluster performance?
So first of all, I'm going to challenge the as a Republican thing, but
as a conservative leaning host.
Yeah. I think she stands to lose nothing by continuing, except for money, which isn't hers to begin with. She's not spending her own money on this, so why bother?
Yeah.
And she doesn't get to walk away with it if she quits and has a surplus left over. So she loses everything by leaving the election. She loses nothing by staying. Because as I think I told you this a couple days ago.
She potentially, and I don't know if she's even after this, but she would potentially lose an appointment to the cabinet, or
she doesn't want that with Trump.
Or
she already had that with Trump, and she doesn't want it. She had that with Trump, and she quit it / was fired from it at the same time. It was really? I quit. You can't quit. I'm firing you, or the other way around, kind of a thing. She was in Trump's cabinet.
You. Get that severance package.
Not how that works. But yeah, she doesn't want an appointment in the Trump administration. She does not like the guy. And so for her, you're right. She stands to lose a potential appointment, but she doesn't want that. So she stands to lose nothing but attention. And in politics, attention is everything. So if she stays in the race, there's a small chance she beats Trump. I don't know that's a big chance. I don't know that it's a real chance. But there is some chance.
I hate to agree with Trump, but she's not going to win.
I think it's a lot would have to happen for her to win the nomination. However, by staying in, she's going to get enough attention that when Trump, if he gets elected president and can no longer run again, guess who's the new front runner? Nikki Haley, because she's a big name that everybody knows.
I think you'll find that the next front runner is going to be Trump, because he doesn't care that he can't run again.
It'll be harder to argue.
Episode.
It would be harder to argue with the current constitutional amendment than it is to argue with some of the pending court cases. Because the pending court cases have to do with how you define certain terms, whereas the constitutional amendment is very cut and clear.
Yeah, 2 terms, 22nd Amendment.
Yeah. So by continuing to run, she's progressing her career no matter what. Even if she goes the Tulsi Gabbard route and just kind of becomes a pundit and person on media, if she goes back into Congress, or not back into Congress, she was a governor, wasn't she?
Yeah, I think so.
She might go the Mitt Romney route and go into Congress. She might, she's got a whole lot more options that staying in the race will give her, specifically because it gives her that much more media attention. It makes no sense for her to drop out any way you cut it.
I don't know. I do think that, I mean, I think the personal toll can't be discounted. And this has to be taking a massive toll on just her, personally.
No more than it already has been taking, though.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's not an easily replenished reserve, and she's already, I'm sure, kind of grasping at whatever she can to muster the just whatever it takes to maintain this campaign when the odds are pretty stacked against her. I will say, even though I don't see any way that she's going to win, I am not sure that I'm not sure if I would rather Biden run against Trump or run against her. That's, my own personal struggle, but I definitely think that this is not the end of her political career. I think that she's going to, have, if and when she loses the primary, she's going to have a really prolific and long-lived career, either, in the Senate or elsewhere in the public sector.
I think Biden is going to have a tough election no matter what.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be 4 more years of Trump. As of right now, I think it's going to be 4 more years of Trump.
I would love to disagree with you, but I am afraid I might have to agree.
On that note, give us our outro and your fun fact.
So the U.S. Senate has in their cafeteria at the Capitol has been serving the same ham and bean soup every single day since 1903. The one day that they have missed was during World War II, when they didn't serve it for some reason because of rationing. But you can look up the recipe, and yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Also, thank you to Halcyon Club for letting us use their song "This Life Is Tough But Fair" off their EP Headset Emotions as our intro and outro music.
I'm hungry now.
Me too. I'm gonna go make some.